Hi, this is Julie with Beadaholique, and in this video I want to teach you how to use Nunn Design resin. And it says a resin kit because with it you're also going to get these stir sticks, some toppers for your bottles, and some measuring cups. But really quickly, before I actually get into the resin making part of this video, I want to show you how to make these little pendants, which we are then going to cover in resin. So if you already know how to do something like this, just fast forward onto the resin. If not, I want to show you how to quickly make these. So we're going to be using some ball chain, and you see we can either match the color or we can do a different color for a mixed metal look. And I'm going to use copper here with a little silver bezel, and then in the middle I'm going to put a little brass stamping. So to make this little pendant, we have some Crafter's Pick glue. Like I said, this is really quick to do. We're just going to put, well, it would help if we opened our bottle. We're going to just put some glue in the base. And it doesn't have to be a super heavy coat, just enough to cover the bottom. Going to put the end of the ball chain, and we're not pre-cutting it, so if you have a scrap that's maybe 4 or 5 inches long, or you have a couple feet, don't worry about pre-cutting it. And we're just going to place it into the bezel around the outside edge. And then we're just going to take our finger, and before we go to the next swirl, we're just going to push it towards the back. Now we're just going to swirl it again inside the round that we just made. And then do the same thing. Push it together. If you have a pair of tweezers, you can use a pair of tweezers for this. But we're just coiling it. And when you can't coil it anymore, it gets too stiff, you're going to take your cutter and snip. Now you'll see that you do have a hole in the middle, and that is where these little stampings come into play. So we're going to take, I think I want to do another heart one, although we could do the acorn. The acorn is pretty cute too. Maybe we'll do the acorn. So go ahead, just put some glue in the middle. And at this point, you just need enough glue to touch part of the acorn that you're going to put on top, because the resin is what's going to really secure it, but you just want it to be anchored so it doesn't float up when you put the resin on. So we covered that little hole, and now we're just going to let that dry, and then I'll be ready to have resin applied over the top. And you see all that white glue? It's going to dry clear like you see here, but if you were to put resin on it right now, that white glue would stay forever white. It's not going to be able to reach the air, and it's not going to be able to dry. So you definitely want to make sure you let the white glue dry to become clear. So we're actually now ready to start with our resin, because I have these 2 pieces I did earlier. And I'm going to try to share some resin tips with you as I do this. So first off, if you'll notice the way that the bail is here, the little loop, it causes the bezel to sit at an angle. Now, if we were to pour resin into it as is, the resin would actually gravitate towards the base, and it would become uneven or it would spill out. So to remedy that, we're going to take this stick right here, and we are going to set our piece on it, and it actually needs a second stick as well. So what that does is it makes it nice and even. So our resin is going to be able to be poured on top of there. So when you're working with resin, you'll want to make sure your pieces are prepped and ready to go before you mix your resin. You want to make sure you're working in a well-ventilated area. Also, make sure it's not too cold or too hot. Resin is temperature sensitive, so you don't want to be working necessarily in the winter in the snow in your garage And you also, conversely, don't want to be working when it's 102 degrees out. The resin's not going to set up properly. Ideally, you want it to be about 75 degrees. So 70, 75, even up towards 80, much more than that, the resin starts to act a little funky. It gets dry really fast. So just kind of keep that in mind. So here is the resin, and you've got two parts to it, and you want to make sure you have exactly equal amounts of part A and part B. So you've got these measuring cups, and we're going to mix a total of 1 ounce. So we're going to do ½ ounce of A and ½ ounce of B, and you'll want to get down level when you look at this. So if you have it on a table like this, don't be looking down when you pour it. You're actually going to want to get on your knees, I know it sounds strange, and make sure you're looking at it at eye level, because that's going to make a difference. And in order for resin to cure properly, it really needs to be equal amounts. So I'm actually going to stand up as I do this. So you might hear a little rustling, and I'm going to get down and look at this at the right level. So I've got my gloves on. You always want to wear gloves. And so I'm going to tip this over. And you don't shake the resin first, because that's going to cause bubbles. You always want to store it in a nice dry place away from the sun. Okay. And put the cap back on after you use it, of course. Now that we've got the equal parts, you can see that there's a lot of variation in there, so we need to mix it up. We've got these stir sticks, and we're going to mix it up until all striations are gone. So it's going to be a couple minutes of mixing, and you want to be gentle with it. You don't want to whip it, but you do want to get the sides. And this is a pretty full cup, so you see I've got my table surface covered just in case any spills out. You can also see it got even foggier, and that's going to be what it does until it becomes clear. When you're done mixing, it's going to look pretty clear with a few bubbles in it. And then what we're going to do to get rid of some of those bubbles before we even do our pour is we're going to let the resin sit for 5 minutes before we pour it. Okay, so as we're doing this, I'll try to share some tips for you about resin, or just some questions that come up quite a bit. So you see I've got these two pieces right here. That's not going to take much resin, but we have mixed this full cup. You don't want to mix much less than this, because you really want the chemical reaction to be able to take place. And if you do too much less than this, I've not had as successful of results. So have other pieces ready so you don't waste this. So just have some molds ready, or have a couple other pieces that you've been wanting to work on all set and ready to go, so you do your resin in a big batch. You can't store this resin, so you can't mix this up and use just a little bit of it and expect to keep it for a couple days and pour some more. You have to use it right away. And you also have to just dispose of your mixing cup. Also your stir stick. You're not going to want to clean those. Okay, we've been mixing for a couple minutes, so I want to show you what it looks like. So we do have a few fine bubbles in there, so we're just going to let this sit as is for 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to pour the resin on top of our glued pieces right here to make our pendants. So I have my pieces and I have my resin. Now I'm going to actually pour these via the stir stick. So I'm going to take the stir stick, I'm going to scrape the base of it to get rid of any excess, and then I'm just going to drip resin into the top very slowly. So I'm covering that brass stamping, and I'm covering the ball chain. I'm just doing 1 drop at a time, and resin is self-leveling, meaning that's going to fill into those cracks on its own. So I'm going to let that just work its magic for a moment as I go on to the next one, and then I'll come back to it and add more if need be. So I'm dripping it mainly in the center. resin does take patience. You could try to just pour it via the cup, but it's very easy that way to pour too much and have it spill over the edges. And here's another situation where I'm actually going to stand up and I'm going to look at it on eye level to see how much resin I actually have doming over the top of the bezel to create like a nice little curve. You don't have to dome it, but when you hear the word doming, that's what people mean, is you've created a little bubble of resin, and the surface tension of the bezel edge is what's keeping it in place. Okay, that's it. That's all I want to do. I could try for a higher dome, but for these particular pieces, I really don't need that or want that. So if you can see what it looks like. Now, I don't see any bubbles, which is really great. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to check back in 15 minutes and see if there are any. So if there are any bubbles, you can use a micro torch, you can use a barbecue lighter, you can use a regular lighter. This is my least favorite option just because your hand is closer to the flame. I really do like a barbecue lighter myself, but this is what we have here. You'll want to not touch the flame to the resin, but you'll want to just be hovering above it, and the heat from the flame is what's going to pull those bubbles up to the top and pop them. So you're not actually touching any flame to the resin. You're just creating a heat source above the resin. But like I said, I don't see any bubbles right here, and waiting that 5 minutes for the resin to settle before I poured it is probably why I'm not seeing any, which is great. But I will check back in 15 minutes to see if any have developed. And then if they haven't developed, we're just going to let this cure like this for 72 hours. And then what I'll do is I'll come back and show you what the finished piece looks like. You really do need to let it cure for that long. I know it seems like a really long time, but this is resin. You're creating a really nice professional look, and you want to make sure you give it proper time to fully cure before you wear it and start enjoying it. Now that my resin has cured, I want to show you the finished result. So here is what it looks like, and you can see that we have no white glue in the base of it because it was fully dried, and it just has a really nice shine to it. It's not going to dent or become marred. It's really strong. It would be waterproof. You can go in the water with this guy. And here's the one that was the gold chain on the silver backdrop. And you can see, if you look really closely, you can see the little bit of silver beneath the ball chain. But again, just a really nice, smooth cover with that resin. So if you want to turn these into necklaces, I want to show you really quickly how you can do that. So I just have some ball chain right here, and I have 2 feet. And because of the orientation on this bezel, we just can go ahead and put the ball chain right through that side bail. So we don't need a jump ring or anything else. And then we just are going to use this ball chain end here to slip the ball chain in. And then we'll do that with the other side. So that becomes our clasp. Just like that. And we have a finished piece of jewelry. A lot of different variation you can do with this technique. You can put the ball chain in all different sizes and shapes and finishes of bezels, and then you can top it off with these different types or the different designs of the little metal stampings. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial learning how to use Nunn Design resin. It really is a lot of fun, and there's so much you can do with resin. You can find all the supplies for this project as well as a number of other resin tutorials at beadaholique.com.